Welcome to today's webinar. This is Dr. Kyle Fagala from Germantown, Tennessee, and today's lecture is going to be on becoming a digital orthodontist. This is going to be 10 social media and digital marketing tips. I do want to thank 3M Oral Care for the opportunity. They have sponsored this presentation. I did author it myself, and I do speak and consult 3M, a great company. I do use their brackets and bands and everything, but the cool thing about this is not about brackets and bands. This is in fact about digital marketing, which is something that can impact and improve really anyone's practice. So kudos to 3M for allowing this today. So as I said, we're going to do 5 tips on social media and then 5 tips on digital marketing. So some of the things that you would learn today, hopefully, is how to grow your orthodontic practice, something that we're all interested in, we're all excited about. And the way that we do this is by engaging our social media audience and then pushing them and also attracting patients to our website. We're going to talk mostly about Facebook. We'll also talk a little bit here and there about Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. We've only got about 45 minutes, so we will mainly focus on Facebook in terms of the social media sites. We're also going to talk a little bit about digital marketing in general, so with your website, SEO, which is search engine optimization, some web design standards, blogging, and also some Google ads. So if anyone watched the Super Bowl, which by the time you're watching this, it could have been several weeks or months ago, Bill Belichick, we're now calling him kind of one of the best NFL coaches ever, if not the best. What he's not great at, though, unfortunately, is social media, and I think he just does this to kind of troll people. But if this is kind of what you think of social media as, then this is definitely a lecture for you. I would also say that if you've had a bad week, we all have bad weeks as orthodontists, take solace in the fact that this is not who you are. You're not the Atlanta Falcons. So hopefully you've had a better week than they did after the Super Bowl. This is who I am. I do look young. I hear it every single day that I go into a consult. I get the funny eyes. And yeah, I do look very young, but I am an orthodontist, I promise you. You can reach out to me. Probably the easiest way, honestly, is on social media. At Memphis Braces, wherever you can find me, or you can just look me up on Facebook. I am admittedly the only person in the world with a Memphis Grizzlies jersey with Fagala on the back of it. So I do live just outside of Memphis. I'm a huge fan of the NBA and NFL as well. And I do have a very weird name. Don't ask me where it comes from. People ask, and I just say that it's unfortunate. I think it's Italian of some sort. This is my family. I do have 3 kids now. We have entered into zone defense. And when you have 3 kids, you're really just hoping to get, 2 out of 3 of the kids looking decent in the photo. This is our newest. This is George. He was not loving the family photo time. I do have a cold start office that I started about 3.5 years ago, right after I graduated from school. It is in Germantown, which if you're looking on the map there, lower left-hand corner, that's where we're located. And you may know that Memphis is right on the Mississippi River, and so just about 15, 20 miles east is Germantown, a suburb of Memphis. That's where we started. It's about 1,800 square feet. If you've ever done a cold start practice, you kind of know how big of a process that is. It took us about a year. Really proud of that. And then now we've opened back in May of 2016 a second location in Collierville, another suburb, and really proud of how that office turned out as well. So every day of the week I do orthodontics just like you. The question does come up pretty often, partly because I look so young and because I've only been an orthodontist for about 3.5 years, is why me? I think that if I were talking on the topic of, surgical class 3 cases and 5-year stability, probably I'm not the best or the first choice or the most logical person to talk on that. But considering we're talking social media and digital marketing, I think it does make a lot of sense. When I was 12, 13, 14, I was one of the first to have the internet and one of the first to join, what became social media. So ICQ and MSN Messenger and AIM and, it was the first day Facebook pages came out, I was on there. And so in that sense, I'm very native to social media and digital marketing. You may have seen articles I've written for Pro Ortho magazine. I've got an article coming out on orthodontic products in March. And I've tried to do the best I can to share this information with other people because it's been very, very beneficial to us. It's been our #1 source of patients, especially as a cold start practice. I've been able to speak. This is from the MKS Forum, which was this past November. I was able to speak to both the staff and the doctors, both on social media and digital marketing topics. As I alluded to earlier, I do speak for 3M and consult for them, an excellent company. I was able to visit their center in Minnesota. Really cool stuff. If you didn't know, they actually developed the space boot. The first step on the moon was 3M had a hand in that, which is pretty cool. I also co-own a digital marketing firm. I think I'm the only orthodontist that does that. We started it back in April of 2016. It's called Neon Canvas. We build websites for lawyers and restaurants and real estate agents, but also for orthodontists, and that's located right next to my Germantown office, so that's pretty cool. The one plug that I will make for myself, and then I will move on into the information, is for a web series I do called The Digital Orthodontist. If you want to sign up for that, it's completely free, and it always will be. It's at neoncanvas.com/thedigitalortho, or if you want to get real fancy, you can text the word braces to 66866. I do a short, 3 to 5 minute video every other week on a topic that is beneficial to you in your practice, and so some sort of a digital marketing, social media tip that you can do very quickly. And so there's my one plug, and we will move into the lecture. So in talking about social media, one of the most common questions that I get is this question of, why should I bother with social media? And I think it's a relevant question. I think that with anything that we have the opportunity to do, we should always question why we are doing it. And I think the question, though, is sometimes asked under a sort of pretense of, I don't really want to bother with social media, or I get this kind of a response of, well, I'm already so successful, my practice is doing great, why do I need to bother? And I guess I would say this very quickly, is that if that is sort of the attitude you have about social media, it might be best to stay off of social media. Sort of like running for political office. If you're not in it to win it, and you're not going to do everything you can to make it great and to win, it's probably better not to try. And so instead of having a page with 3 posts a year that aren't that great anyway, it might be better to stay off of social media. But if it's something that you want to give a try at, and it is something that can be very valuable, here are the reasons why. And 73% of U.S. people are on social media. That's essentially everyone. If you consider that, anyone over the age of 80 or anyone below the age of 10 may not be on social media, that's pretty much everyone is on social media. The average usage is about 3 hours per day, which if you have teenagers, you would say immediately, well, that's pretty low. There are a certain number of teenagers especially that spend almost their entire day on social media, and that's only going to grow as things move on. Patients, parents, referrals, potential employees, they are all on social media. Oftentimes the first thing that I talk to people about when I see them is a social media post that we did. People are paying attention. And just as radio gave way to TV, and then TV is now giving way to the internet, and then in some sense internet is kind of giving way to social media, this is the new media. And this is, you think about people kind of gathered around the radio listening to radio broadcasts in the 40s and 50s. This is kind of what the internet is now, and what social media is. This is the main media, and so it's a way that people can really see your story. Number 2, it's also cheap and it's easy. You cannot compare the cost of a Facebook ad to that of a newspaper ad. You also can't compare the return on investment that you can get from a Facebook ad, and so it's much cheaper, it's much easier. Everyone has access to it. And simply, you can tell your story. Someone who opened a practice from scratch and did not have a significant marketing budget or a significant budget at all, to be honest, being able to do Facebook ads for relatively little money was a real benefit to us. And so it allowed us to tell our story. And the beauty is that if you have a compelling story, one that will attract patients, well, you can tell it, which is why I love social media. This is how teens use social media. So most of our patients probably are in that 13 to 17-year-old range, and kind of interestingly, I would say that most of them are actually on Facebook. If you asked them, they would say, well, I don't really like Facebook, and it's because their aunts and their grandmas are on there. They actually probably use Instagram and Snapchat more so, but Facebook is still a site where they're at, and I would argue, too, that by the time they hit college and they hit their career, they'll be back on Facebook. I really just don't see Facebook going anywhere. Here's a really cool thing I got from Media Kicks, and it's based on a lot of different other sources, but it's this question of how much time do people spend on social media? Again, to kind of appreciate, hopefully, how much time is spent on social media, and then maybe how much time we should spend attracting people there. The average daily time, this is of adults in general, that it's spent on social media is pretty staggering. 40 minutes a day on YouTube, 35 minutes on Facebook, 25 minutes on Snapchat, 15 on Instagram, and then just a minute on Twitter. I think Twitter is actually in a lot of trouble, had a lot of financial issues. I hope it stays around. I love that site, but just a minute a day just really doesn't stack up against the others. Of course, if you consider that Facebook owns Instagram, they're getting about 50 minutes of everyone's day. Additionally, they own Messenger, which is a popular messaging app, so they're getting over an hour of people's day every day, which is pretty impressive. If you consider in a lifetime, and these are all pretty gross averages, and these things will change over time, but you're considering that that's over a year that people spend on both YouTube, Facebook, and Snapchat. So kind of overall about 5 years and 4 months of one's life on social media. How does that stack up against other daily activities? Well, we watch TV almost 8 years of our lives, which I would just go ahead and say is pretty sad, pretty crazy. There are so many more important things that we could do. Of course, I'm guilty of it as well. And then social media, we eat and drink about 3 years, and on kind of down the line, 6 months of laundry. I don't know if I do that much laundry, but anyway. What could you do with that time? We won't read all these, but you can kind of see and get the point is that we could do a lot of things that maybe are arguably more important. Now, I don't think that watching the Simpsons series 215 times is more important, but there's a lot of things that we could do with that time. I mean, 5 years and 4 months that we're spending on social media. Pretty crazy. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into the top 5 social media tips. These are not necessarily in a particular order, but the first one we'll get into is just this concept of storytelling, the ability that Facebook and Instagram and Twitter gives us to tell our story. Our practice, Saddle Creek Orthodontics, we spend a lot of time telling our story. It's something that we're real proud of, and it's something that attracts a lot of patients to our office. This is a text message that someone sent me, and it says, Saddle Creek Orthodontics is so creative and so on top of social media. Well, how do you know about them? Dr. Fagla is his name, really good guy. And this person said, I see them on Facebook all the time. This is actually from someone I've never met and may never meet, and yet they have an opinion that has been formed from our social media activity, which is pretty cool. And so she already has an idea of what we're about, and it would stand to reason that at the time at which maybe her son or her brother or cousin needs braces, that my name would get brought up, which is a pretty powerful concept. So if anyone's read this book, I highly recommend it. It's by a guy named Simon Sinek. It's called Start With Why. If you don't like to read, that's okay. There is a TED Talk, which is about a 15-minute summary of this book, that I really cannot recommend enough. And so Start With Why is what it's called. We're going to talk a little bit about his thing, which is called the Golden Circle, and it's this idea of how businesses that are really, really good brand themselves and explain what they're about. And so what you'll see is in the middle of that circle you have the why of a company or a brand, you have then the how, and you have the what. So let's talk a little bit about that on a topic that probably makes sense to most everyone, so we'll use it, and that is computer companies. So starting, let's say, the late 90s, there was a big competition that was forged between Dell and then also Mac or Apple. And at the time, Dell was sort of a computer company's computer company. They were very focused on, if we go back to this little circle, they're very focused on the what and the how of computers. What is their what? Well, they're a computer company. And the how, is that they are going to build computers that are the fastest, so the fastest processor with the biggest hard drive space at the cheapest price, right? Now, on the other hand, Apple at that time, Steve Jobs kind of came back into Apple, and what Apple was about was their why, or their central focus, or what drove them, almost sort of like a religion, kind of what was at their core. And what was at their core was that they were going to challenge the status quo. They were going to think differently. So instead of having the traditional hard drive that's set next to the monitor, they would actually combine it all into one, and then they would make it all different colors because why not? It's thinking differently. It's challenging the status quo. Their mouse button only had one button instead of two, and no scrolly wheel. Just completely different. Okay. Ultimately, it's still a computer, and the good news is the computer worked really well, and that was part of their success. But really, what caught, I think, the national consciousness was that it was different, and that they had a why that they pursued on throughout the next couple decades. And so when Dell, a really great computer company, released an MP3 player, no one bought it. And the reason is because they had defined themselves as a computer company. They were very focused on the what and how of being a computer company, and so no one wanted to buy their MP3 player. Of course, when Apple released an MP3 player, because people understand them and they understand their why, everyone bought it. When they released a DVR, everyone bought it. And when they released a watch, everyone bought it. And it's because people believe in Apple. And so this is what he says. This is sort of his thesis statement from Start With Why, is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So as orthodontists, we have to understand that we are more than people that are straightening teeth. We have many more opportunities to improve the lives of our patients, and that I would argue that that should be our focus. And so when we look at this golden circle, we as orthodontists, we should start with the why. You may not know what your why is. You may not know what your core values or your mission statement are. You may have simply been focused for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years on simply straightening teeth for children and adults. And that is what I typically see when I look at social media or websites, is very much what and how based marketing or branding. So what is our why? What Sour Creek Orthodontics, our why, or our goal, or what primarily drives us, is to make our patients' lives better. Now, what that means exactly, it could be really anything. It could be anything from going to schools to help teach kids about dental health. It could be doing a movie night, or a special like grand opening party, a block party for patients. It could be doing giveaways. It could just be simply being really great to your patients and being patient focused. But that is our why, and that's where every decision that we make comes from. And if it does not support our why, so if the way that we want to do braces or Invisalign or whatever, clear aligners I should say, the way that we do that, if it does not support our why, then it's not something that we want to be about. So this would be our how, which kind of follows next, so from our why to our how to our what. And I don't want to act like the how is not important. Our how includes, the way that we straighten teeth, and so brackets and clear aligners and class 2 correctors and so on and so forth. Really important stuff. And in the same way, if Apple was just about challenging the status quo and thinking differently, but their computers weren't great, their how was not good, and then they weren't making great computers, well, no one would have bought them. So it's very important to have a how, but it needs to support your why. And so here's a couple examples. So we do use Clarity Advanced brackets for our ceramic brackets. They're really excellent. It's as close as I've ever had to a metal bracket. In a lot of ways, I prefer them, especially the flash-free ones. But one of the issues I have is putting a metal wire in with a clear bracket. It seems kind of counterintuitive. And then the other problem I have is having a tie that stains, because then again you have a situation where it's almost a bait and switch. It's like, well, we're going to give you clear braces, but then the tie stains. And so I'll show you kind of what we use. And yeah, you might be looking at this and say, well, those ties look a little blue. The reason that we use them is actually because the blue within the tie counteracts the staining process. And so from any safe distance, it actually looks better longer than any other option, like the ones you're maybe more familiar with. On the right, you see the obscure and the smoke options. And this is actually a tie from RMO. This is a pearl blue tie. It works the best of anything we've used, and then we use G&H coated wires. It doesn't really matter the brand, but these are the ones that we have found. But the point is that with our how, clear brackets, something that every patient would want, braces that are less obvious or less noticeable, we give them something that supports the why, which is to make their lives better as we straighten their teeth. And so that makes sense, right? And so then you can kind of see what ceramic brackets look like. And certainly this is a how-based concept that we can market very effectively on Facebook, because again, it supports our why. We want to be a practice that's different, that's making our patients' lives better, and we care about patients. Another one is 3D printing and digital scanning, and we are really at an exciting point in the orthodontic world where we have all these tools available to us, all this new technology. And of course, as a technological guy, this is exciting to me. So we have a scanner, and so if we have a patient that needs a retainer, we can scan that, and then you see a video that's playing. I've got the sound muted, but this is something I did on Snapchat, and so you can kind of tell your story on Snapchat in a very easy way, showing how we actually take a digital scan. We now have a printer in-house. It's a $3,500 printer. It's not extremely expensive, but we can print, and there's a printer. You can print models now. Now, the benefit to this is if someone loses their retainer, you can have given them the printed model, or you also have it stored in the cloud. You could print it right off again. So we're sort of moving away from sort of the gag-inducing, no one really likes Algent impression, to now a scan and then printing it within your office. The quality is even better, and you have the added benefit of having it stored in the cloud. And so it's a really cool thing. Again, it's a how-based thing. In and of itself, it's just like anyone else down the street, but it supports the why of your practice. It's in the best interest of your patients. Our what as orthodontists is that we straighten the teeth of adults and children, and that is, again, very important. But if you talk to any orthodontist on any street in America, that's what they do. We all have that in common. We all straighten the teeth of children and adults. And even further, general dentists that are doing braces, well, what do you think they do? Well, they straighten the teeth of children and adults, some of them. And so we have to find a way to differentiate ourselves and to tell stories that are more compelling, so that we as orthodontic specialists can continue to be successful in what we do. And so, as I said earlier, if your results are not good, it's not going to make a difference. So your results have to be great with what you do. So it can't just be fluff. It can't be like a religion that promises one thing and then never delivers on it. You have to deliver on that promise. And so again, that's The Golden Circle by Simon Sinek. Look that book up. Look up that TED Talk. Really great stuff. One of those things that comes around every few years that really changes the way you can think about things. So we should, with what we do, we should focus on the things that matter. This would be number 2. And so if you look at this number 1440 and kind of consider, well, what does that number mean? It's actually the number of minutes in a day. Okay, so if you consider all the time that we spend on things that maybe ultimately won't matter, we need to seek to spend more time on the things that do matter. And so, we're spending about 8 hours sleeping if we're lucky. We spend a lot of time, answering emails or doing things that, like, even a minute later maybe don't matter. And so I want to talk a little bit about maybe, with all these new social media tools, it can take a lot of these minutes from our day, so we need to seek to limit those. This is our 34th president. This is Dwight D. Eisenhower, and he said this, I really like this, is that what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. And so he had a thing that was called the Eisenhower box. And if you look at it, we have things that are urgent and things that are not urgent, and then we also have things that are important and things that are not important. So that creates for us a sort of matrix where we have 4 sections. And so as an example, what are some things that are urgent and are also important? Well, these would be things that you should do because they're urgent and they're important, like finishing a project that is due today. So for instance, doing this webinar, it's urgent, it's important, I've got to do it. Now, things that are not urgent but are important are things that you should decide, things that you should prioritize, yes, but things that you have to maybe schedule out. So long-term goals, spending time with family, going on a vacation, exercising, things that are definitely important, but things that are not urgent. Now, what about things that are not important but are urgent? These are things that we should delegate, and I think we're guilty as orthodontists of wanting to do everything ourselves a lot of times, whereas we should be delegating more things. And so things like booking travel, use a travel agent. Most of your emails, I'd actually argue that someone could look through the bulk of your email just like looking through the bulk of your mail that comes in your mailbox, and yet for whatever reason we allow email to sort of take over our lives. We allow it to buzz our phone every time we get an email, and it's probably true that maybe 3% of emails are important at all. And so maybe getting someone to look through emails, someone at your office, would be a good idea. Mowing your lawn. Now, if you love mowing your lawn, go for it. That's great. But if you don't, and I have it, my dad actually has complained for 40 years. Well, I haven't known him for 40 years, but for as long as I've known him, complained about mowing the lawn. And I don't understand, because it's something you can pay someone to do for you. You can delegate that to someone who mows lawns for a living. And even things like scheduling interviews. We just went through a hiring process, and there's a lot of work that goes on. That can be delegated to someone, and I think you'll actually find, as we did this time, that she actually did a better job with it. It was our office manager that handled all that. So it's just something that, it could just be done by someone else. Now, these are the items that we spend, as we sort of showed earlier, we probably spend the bulk of our time on, and they're not important and they're not urgent. These are items that we should delete from our lives, or we should seek to delete as much as possible. So things like TV or Netflix or checking social media or junk mail or so on and so forth. These are things that, yeah, we need a little bit of this in our lives, but if we're spending 7, 8, 10 years of our lives on these things, it's kind of sad. And so the area that we really need to try and seek to focus more on are these not urgent but important tasks. These are the tasks, because they lack urgency, that we sometimes miss out on. These are the things that in 5 or 10 or 15 years will still matter, whereas we spend all this time on things that we should delete that won't matter the minute after we're done working on them. All right, so here's another principle in terms of focusing on the things that matter, and also in terms of getting these social media tasks done. It's the 10-80-10 principle. Talk about people who fly planes, and so pilots. I was actually able to go on a private jet and talk to the pilots there and kind of ask them to make sure that what I was about to say here is true, and they agreed. And it's the idea that the 2 hardest things in flying a plane, you might guess, would be taking the plane off and then landing the plane. That's the first, let's say 10%, and the last 10% of flying a plane. So John Maxwell has this 10-80-10 principle, and it's the same idea. It's that you, as the leader of your company or of your brand or of your orthodontic practice, you should be involved in the first 10% and the last 10% of every task. The 80% in the middle can be delegated. So let's apply that to social media. With social media, the first 10% is deciding, well, what sort of posts are we going to do this month? How are we going to take the photos? How are they going to be edited? What sort of story are we trying to tell? The 80% in the middle is actually taking the photos, editing them, captioning them, scheduling them. That's a lot of work. It might take several hours, and you can delegate that. Now the last 10% is coming back on the back end and making sure that everything was spelled correctly and kind of seeing how you performed and then starting it back over again with the first 10%. Now as you grow, the beauty of the 10-80-10 principle is if you get someone in that job that's very good at it, that can even shrink to 296-2. You may only be involved with about 4% of the process, which is the beauty of delegation. And again, you'll find that a lot of times people can do it better than you yourself can do it. So anything you can delegate, try and delegate so you can focus on the things that matter. Now in terms of who that person in your office is, that I would say we call it a social media manager. This is someone that would manage your social media. Who is the right person? That's maybe a topic that's bigger than what we can talk about today, but I would say someone in their 20s who is native with social media. They have grown up with it. They understand it. When you look at their social media, they have a lot of engagement. Everything looks nice, both the photos and the captions. They know how to spell. They understand grammar. That's the kind of person you want. Also someone who is very self-initiated and who's very organized. So it's not going to be everyone in your office, and it may not be the person that really wants to do your social media, but you need to find that person, and as you're interviewing, kind of be looking for those skills. All right, so number 3, we're going to create engaging content. So if we're going to be doing social media, our content has to be high quality. It has to be engaging. And so here are some examples of some posts that we've done that are very engaging and have gotten a lot of reach. And so reach is just how many people see your post. As you can see there on the lower, 5,800 people saw it, and that's all just organic reach. And so that's about as good as it would get for us. That's really good. Also, you can kind of see that we'll caption photos a little bit differently. We try and sort of speak to the audience that we have. That is, on our page at least, the majority is about 25 to 40-year-old females, and so we try and speak in ways that make sense to them. And so photos of your family has nothing to do with orthodontics, has nothing to do with the how and the what of orthodontics, but it has a lot to do with the why of who I am as a person, that because I have family values, that our practice has family values. And so it is a story, just like in a newspaper, the stories that get a lot of interest, and also online. I mean, we have now TMZ that just covers celebrities because we're interested in their lives. That is the sort of content that people are interested in, so you should apply that concept to the work that you do. Now, you can also focus on patients. This is Casey. She's lovely. I mean, she got her braces off, and she looks great. And this is about her braces coming off, but it's also focused on who she is. It's not just like it's so rudimentary to the how and the what of what we do. But obviously, if you have a beautiful patient and you've got a good result, that's a story that people will be interested in. Here's something, again, has nothing to do with braces, but these are, this is a patient of ours, and in November we had people write on there what they're thankful for, and she said she's thankful for her mommy. So considering our core demographic, 25 to 45-year-old moms of 2.5 or whatever, this obviously speaks to them very much. And again, this idea that this is sort of our family, and that's what we're about, is a really strong message that I want people to pick up on. Now, things like this. This is Lauren, who used to run our social media, really, really excellent employee, but she ended up having a baby, and so she had to leave our office, and so a post like this is going to do extremely well. Those who love her from coming to our office are going to see that and want to wish her the best and that sort of thing. So take the opportunity to tell these stories. If you don't capture it with a photo, no one's going to know about it. So if you're doing some really cool stuff or you have a really cool moment in your office, you need to get a photo of it and share it with people. You need to tell your story. All right, so how do we get this done? And so this is a question I get very commonly as well. This is all well and good, but how do you make sure this gets done? And so we do have certain sort of orders of things that these are the goals that we have, and this is how we get it done. So we're talking about Facebook. The goal is for high quality photos that are watermarked with highly engaging captions, everyone tagged, and posted at a time where most of your audience is online. So I'm going to talk about some of the tools that we use to accomplish those goals. This would sort of be what I'd call our quintessential photo. This is, you've got a blurred background, everything is in focus in the front, and everything is sort of blurred in the background. You can really only achieve that with a DSLR camera, which is like a fancy Canon or Nikon camera with a big lens on it. The new iPhone 7, we'll talk about it here in a second, but it actually has the ability to create this effect, which is in the photography world called a bokeh effect. You can think of it, though, as just a blurred background. And so we're actually moving over to using mobile devices now. And so let's kind of go down, down the line in terms of how we accomplish this. Now, if you want to use a DSLR, which I think is a great idea, if you really want high-quality photos, you really want something that stands out, it's going to look more like a national brand would look, you can get it for a very inexpensive amount. So a Canon, this is just a discontinued, probably 10-year-old model, but it's still a DSLR, and it still has a good sensor in it. The T2i is just a Rebel. It's the entry level, $230, probably cheaper today. This is from about a year ago. The lens that we like is a fixed lens, meaning that you can't zoom it in or out. It's at 50 millimeters, so you do have to move a little bit away from the subject. But the beauty of it is it gets a very low f-stop. And you may not know a lot about photography, but just to get a blurred background, you want a low f-stop. So an f-stop in the 2 to 3 range is going to only focus a certain amount of the photo, which will be the subject, whereas the background will fade. And that's usually the one thing that makes photos look more professional, is having that lower f-stop. And it's something that a typical camera phone cannot do. Now, as I was saying, this iPhone 7 Plus, which is there on the right, the gold one, that has now 2 cameras, and it can kind of use digital trickery to accomplish this sort of bokeh effect. And so I think as we move on, obviously being able to do it on a phone is going to be a lot quicker, and the workflow is going to be a lot better. And so that's kind of what we're moving to, just for the seamlessness of it. One of the apps that we use is called Afterlight. If you're going to use an app to edit your photos, you want to make sure that it doesn't compress the photos, and Afterlight does not. It allows us to do, so a lot of contrast and brightness adjustments just to make the photos look as good as they can. Another one that we use is called Perfect 365. If you have a teenage girl, you may have her using this to make her selfies look as ideal as they can. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. Now, on the left, you see sort of the before of a lady, and then you see the after. Still looks like the same lady. It does not look like alien. You can really overdo it with these kind of apps where it sort of looks, completely fake and overly airbrushed. But what you see is her teeth are a little wider, the bags under her eyes are gone. And I would say this, is that we only use this to remove things that would otherwise embarrass patients. So people always ask, well, aren't people going to be upset that you've posted them on social media? And the truth is that if you have a good reputation on social media, essentially you're perceived to be a cool place or a cool page, and you make that person look good, they're going to be thrilled that you've put them on social media. If you make them look bad, they've got a pimple on their nose, or they've got bags under their eyes, they're not going to really want to be on there. And if you tag them, they're going to kind of untag it. They're not going to want to be seen. And so we do this if we need to. I would caution against using it to change your results. I think that we should always seek to be honest and have a lot of integrity with our work. And so if you're using it to kind of alter results to make them look better or different, I'm not good with that. But for removing a pimple off the nose or from removing bags under eyes, I think that's perfectly fine. I think it's within what is ethical. Another app that I use is called iWatermark, and very quickly, that is just to get, you see the SEO that's in the top right-hand corner of that photo. It's just a logo that's superimposed on a photo. It removes the background, and so you'll need what's called a transparent PNG file, just like a JPEG or a TIFF or a GIF or PDF. A PNG file is the file that you need. It has a transparent background. Your graphic designer can get that to you from your logo. And then iWatermark costs about $3 or $4. You can superimpose it very easily. And so that allows your logo to sort of be in the background subtly, kind of reminding people that that's your brand. So something we do on every one of our photos. And so what you get in terms of engaging content is you get the ability to tell stories that'll look great. And so one of those stories is clinical photography. So you can combine the photos that we take every single day on our patients before and after with a photo that you take after, and it makes for a really great story. What I would say is, if you look on the left side here with this patient, with Adelaide, the focus is on her. It's on her joy after getting her braces off. The teeth are kind of the caption underneath. And I could actually make the teeth even smaller, and I think that would fit kind of what people are interested in more. As doctors, we want to see the composite 8, we want to see the full thing, we want to see trace cephs and all that, and superimpositions, but patients, they want to see a smiling, happy person that is excited that they got braces with us. And so here's a few examples of sort of what you can do. This is one that we try and do about 2 a month of, and man, it does great. The only bummer is you can't boost it on Facebook. They don't like you to do close-up photos of teeth or before and after, so you really can't get away with it. But what you can see here is that showing off your results can be something that actually does very well on Facebook. We just have to do it in a little bit different way than what we're used to from our orthodontic training. So again, the focus on the people, and then the teeth are a part of that story because it's impressive to anybody. Anyone can kind of get crowded teeth to now straight teeth. But the focus, again, in my opinion, should be on the patient themselves. All right, so the fourth thing here in terms of a social media tip would be to know and grow your audience. And so I'll kind of quickly go through this. There is a Digital Ortho episode on this topic, but this is Facebook Insights. And so if you're on your Facebook page on a desktop, there's a tab at the top called Insights, and there you can learn a lot about your page. And so if you have like 3,000 people following you, you can really learn a lot about your demographic. And just like any marketing firm or any major national brand, they would really understand who are we selling to, who is our core demographic, and who is essentially our avatar client, who is it that we're trying to sell to. Once you know that, then the stories that you tell should sort of fit that avenue. As orthodontists, obviously we have a lot of different patients, young, old, male, female, but the main decision maker, 85% of the time, is going to be a mother aged 28 to 45, like we've said before. And you'll see that the majority of our people that follow us on Facebook land in that demographic. And so a couple areas I really like this posts section. You can see when people are online. The truth is what you'll see is that people are online all the time, but it actually peaks somewhere between 6 and 8 p.m., at least on our page. It's usually true of most people's pages. I call this sort of the humpback whale of Facebook Insights. You can see the low point is about 3 a.m., so you shouldn't really post photos at like 3 a.m. Probably not going to do as well. We usually like to post in the middle of the day, maybe even early in the day, also kind of around 6 p.m. seems to do really well for us. You can also see where the people that follow your page are from. Also, you can see that 71% of our fans are female, only 28 are male. And then you can see the biggest block is that 25 to 34 at 28%, and then right after that in the 35 to 44. So it supports that statement of our core demographic being 25 to 44-year-old females. Now your page may be different, and you need to look it up. Another thing is if you're doing Facebook ads, so again, you're trying to know your audience, and then you're trying to grow your audience. And so you can also look in your practice management software and see where most of your patients are coming from. You can establish the zip codes where not only most of your patients, but maybe even where your best patients are coming from. And you can market to them. You can boost your posts to them. You can just use the boost button, which you can do on mobile or desktop. You can create a custom audience, which I've just done with, I think, our 6 or 7 best zip codes with an age range of 25 to 45. You can even just focus on females, and you can boost posts to them. So you can basically make sure that you get several thousand other people to look at your posts for a really reasonable amount of money, usually about $10 per 1,000 people that see your post, which again is amazing in terms of cost. Now if you really want to get complicated with it but also get better results, you can go in on a desktop to Ad Manager and you can really dial these things in and get a lot more detailed beyond the scope of what we can do today, but there's a lot of amazing things. You can also, because Facebook owns Instagram, if you have an Instagram account, you can push posts on into Instagram, which is a really cool thing to be able to do. Now I want to tell a quick story here. This is about a patient that I had in dental school. His name's Alfonso Ratliff, and a lot of times patients will show up, especially in dental school, and they'll start telling you stories, and you're kind of like, I don't know if that's true. That kind of sounds a little bit too good to be true, because he told me he was a heavyweight boxer and fought all around the world, but he had a little folder with him, and he opened it, and the first photo that he showed me was this. I was like, wow, you look pretty good. You look like a boxer. The next photo, and I don't have it, unfortunately, is a photo of him with Don King. You can't mistake Don King and his hair. And I was like, okay, well, if you knew Don King, then maybe you're telling the truth here. Sure enough, Alfonso was an excellent boxer. He was 25-9 over his career. He had 18 knockouts. The only unfortunate thing about his career is that he ran into someone who happened to be pretty good at boxing, and that was Mike Tyson. He ran into Tyson right in the middle of the 80s when, if you're a fan of boxing, Tyson was about as good as one could get. At least a top 5 boxer for a period of a couple years there. Just an explosive boxer, and he was pretty much knocking everyone out in the first or second round. Unfortunately, my friend Alfonso did not make it very far. He did make it into the second round, but he got knocked out, unfortunately. The reason I bring up boxing is because I love boxing, but also because of this idea that I've gotten from Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vaynerchuk's a very well-known speaker, and he also owns a marketing company that markets for big brands. And one of his major points, and he wrote a book about it, is that social media marketing or digital marketing is a lot like boxing. What I mean by that is that much like a boxer that uses jabs to set up the other boxer. Now, jab in and of itself is not doing a lot of damage. It's a very light punch, but with time, it does take away from the other boxer, and it opens up the opportunity to throw a big punch that could knock someone out, like a right hook, an uppercut, a haymaker, whatever. And so in this quote, it says, whatever your jab is, it doesn't entitle you to land the right hook. It just allows you to have the audacity to ask. So what I see from most orthodontists, they join Facebook on a Monday, And on a Tuesday, they're looking for a, a 10-to-1 return on investment. They're looking for, to throw an uppercut. Come in $1,000 off braces, and they want, 25 starts from it. And the truth is that is not the world we live in. Just like boxing, if we just throw right hooks and uppercuts and these big punches, the other boxer, and in this case the consumer, is going to be wise to that, and they're going to move out of the way. They're going to avoid all of our punches. They're going to unfollow us, and they're going to ignore us. And so the way that I view social media, just like Gary Vaynerchuk, is that we need to provide content to people that benefits them. So content on human interest things that is of interest to everyone, and not just on topics like braces and clear aligners and so on and so forth. Now, with time, once they get to know us, then they will respond when we ask them to come in. Again, it says you have the ability to throw the right hook. You may not land it. They may not come in to see you, but you have the ability to ask. You've been granted that by jabbing, by providing good content over time. So here is an example of a jab in our office. This is on Halloween. We dressed up as a bunch of famous people from the Memphis area, and it has nothing to do, 0.0 to do with braces, and yet it got an amazing amount of reach and got our name out there. And so it gives people an awareness of Saddle Creek Orthodontics such that hopefully when they go to Google someday, maybe it's a year later, maybe it's 5 years later, we'll kind of be in the back of their mind when we show up. And that's kind of the idea. Here's another just quick tip for you if you're just kind of screenshotting some tips. It's a very easy one. If you run a post on Facebook and let's say 39 people like it, you can actually open that up, ideally on a desktop, and you'll see that there's this invite button. So if someone has liked your post but they don't like your page, you can invite them to like your page. A really great way to grow your audience. Here's another way. We use a Smurl counter. It's a company from France. I don't know what Smurl means, but it's this really cool counter that flips through about a second after they like your page in real time. It's very tangible, really nothing like it, and it's a really cool thing. We have both of our offices that shows our Facebook like count. And you can kind of see what it looks like. And we just encourage people to like our page. A really great way to grow your audience. Obviously, the bigger the audience you have, the more benefit that you get from the posts that you put so much time into. Now, the last thing in terms of social media is this idea of leveraging your personal profile. The best person that I know at doing this is an orthodontist, and I asked him for the permission to show this, and he said yes, and his name is Neil Kravitz. Now, there are two things. We have a Facebook page that would be like, Saddle Creek Orthodontics. We also have a personal profile, and you can have up to 5,000 friends. You better believe Neil probably has 5,000 if you go look. And that's a whole nother way of marketing yourself. Whereas, they may start hiding posts on the Facebook page. If you become popular on a personal page, you have an immense amount of reach that you can have. And so Neil will talk about the schools he sponsors. He talks about how his office is always open. He offers free retainers to his patients and even to people who aren't his patients. And because of that, people absolutely love Neil. And you better believe in his area, when they're thinking about braces, they're going to think about him. They're definitely going to think about him. And so it is something where he has a very powerful business model based a lot of which on social media. Now, it's telling a story that is supported by his practice, of course. But, when he posts something like this, he's on the cover of the bulletin, he's getting like 700, 800 likes. I mean, it's crazy. There's very few people that can say that. And so people understand him. I guarantee you that people show up at his office knowing who he is, almost like a celebrity. And in fact, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard of, but on Halloween, there were several dozen people in his community who dressed up as him. So I don't know that anyone else in the world could accomplish what Neil can do. And one of the things is that he leverages his personal profile. Now, one thing that he understands is what another colleague of mine, Cole Johnson, talks about, which is called the law of like. And so when we think about social media, you can't forget that it is supposed to be social. And so what Cole talks about is that people like you exactly as much as you like them. And so if you're on social media and you're only ever about yourself and you're not commenting on other people's posts or liking their posts, eventually they're not going to like you. You're not going to endear yourself to them as much as you could. It's much like a golden retriever versus a cat. Now, if I have cat people out there, I'm sorry, you might want to tune out for a few seconds, but the reason that most people like dogs, like golden retrievers, more than cats is because golden retrievers are interested in us. They like us more than they like themselves. Cats, on the other hand, they like themselves almost entirely, and that's kind of the personality of a cat. You might like that, but most people prefer dogs because they like us. In the same way that if you're someone at a dinner party and all you want to do is talk about yourself, people get tired of you. They don't really want to be at the next dinner party with you. And so we need to be interested in other people and interacting with other people on social media. All right, so real quickly, We spent a lot of time on social media, but we're going to jump into a top 5 website and digital marketing tips. We're going to kind of race through this. This is a huge topic. We're not going to be able to cover everything, but here's some things to kind of keep in the back of your mind, especially if you're about to redesign your website or you want to make some changes. In terms of web design standards, this is an obvious one if you've been awake the last few years in terms of web design, but it's to have responsive web design. For the first time ever, now more people are viewing a website on mobile than on a desktop computer or on a laptop. That's only going to grow and grow and grow. And so your website has to look good not only on desktop, but I would even say more so on a cell phone or on an iPad. And so the way that it's designed should look like that. Another web design standard that you've probably seen is video that's in the background of a web page. That gives you a lot of opportunities for some really cool storytelling. Unfortunately, once you get to the cell phone, it is going to need to be a photo, and so there are ways to code it where you can have both options. Another thing that's relatively new is skeleton screens, and you may have noticed this if you're on slow internet especially and you load up Facebook. You actually see this sort of schematic of what's to come, and even on Instagram you sort of see a blurred version of what photo is coming. The reason they do that is because they have done studies, and if a person will see what is about to come as opposed to nothing, like seeing a white screen, they're more likely to stick around and not bounce from that site. And so you can use that as you design your website with things like lazy load or with skeleton screens. Things that sort of show someone what is coming will keep them there longer. Another thing that you've probably seen is what's called parallax, and it's the ability to have a mostly stable photo where the text kind of moves on top of it. Again, that's just sort of a web design standard that I see a lot and that I think makes websites look modern. Number 2, SEO. We talked briefly about this in the intro, but this is search engine optimization. And here's some best practices. Now, what SEO helps you do is it helps your website rank higher on Google. So if you have good search engine optimization, your website is optimized for search engines, the big one being Google, you're going to rank higher on search engines. So here's some statistics about that just so you sort of understand briefly. 93% of online experiences begin with a search engine. Google is the #1 most popular website. It's most people's home pages. Search is also the #1 driver of traffic to content sites, and it beats social media by more than 300%. So social media is important, but at the end of the day, in terms of business, I would argue that your website and your Google presence is more important in terms of driving patients to your practice. 75% of users never scroll past the first page of search results. So if you're not on the first page, it's almost like you don't exist. Most people ignore paid ads, and so you want to be in the organic results. And I tell people it's sort of like, the organic results are going to be the ones that are real, and it's going to be the ones that people that are going to pay more attention to. It's sort of like owning real estate. Now you can rent paid ads, you can rent real estate, but if you want, a real estate, thing, you would want to own more than you'd want to rent. Now, ideally, I'd want to have both, right? I want, Boardwalk and Park Place, but that's kind of the way you can view it. But organic results are more important than the paid ones. Now, this is amazing, but SEO leads have a 14.6% close rate, while traditional, like direct mail, print advertising, only have a 1.7% close rate. So we talked about digital marketing being cheap and easy, but man, it's also very, very effective. Here are the top 5 SEO elements. These are mine that I kind of have come up with from spending a few years thinking about this, but a lot of it does come down to how your website is built, and so there's only so much you can do to get around that. But you want a responsive and user-friendly website. You want unique, engaging, and fresh content. You want content that changes from week to week, so blog is a great way to do that. You also want keyword optimization, so you want words on your page that fit what it is that you're doing. So as an orthodontist, you want words like braces and clear aligners and all those sort of things. You also want them optimized for what people are searching for. You want quality backlinks. These would be links from other sites that link back to your website. And so the way that you can do that is by writing articles or by having a PR person reach out to something like Forbes to maybe write an article about you. That really helps your website and helps it establish authority for your website. You also want a page that loads very fast. Even though internet is becoming faster and faster and faster, one of the big things that Google will measure your practice website by is how quickly it loads. And also, if your website loads quickly, we talked about the skeleton screens. If it loads quickly, people are less likely to bounce away from your website. That is one way that Google establishes how good your website is if 90% of people come to your website and they bounce right away, it establishes that it's not a high-quality website. If you were to do a search in my area for Memphis braces, if you don't kind of understand what Google looks like, at the very top you see there an advertisement, In the middle, you see the map section, which is mostly influenced by your Google reviews and also just your overall authority and also geography. And then below that, you see, starting with orthodontics, with my practice, you see now organic results. And so ideally, you'd want to be 1 and 2 if you could be. Number 3 is to get your blog on. So probably a lot of you out there don't even read a lot of blogs. I don't, to be honest. I read a lot online, but I don't read a lot of blogs. And I don't really enjoy blogging. It's a lot of work. But I will say that it is a very, very important thing if you're trying to get your website to show up organically towards the top in Google. Blogging is extremely important. And the crazy thing is that while I may not read a lot of blogs, a lot of people do, and they will click through on them. And so you can see the reach kind of on these posts. It's very high. So how much do braces cost? A question that a lot of people are asking. A very popular Google search. It did really well as a blog. The ABCs of braces. We did a thing about braces for every letter of the alphabet. Did extremely well. It can also be topics that aren't necessarily directly related to our how or what. This was wardrobe must-haves for any style. This was our TC wrote this, and we posted this. And it kind of had to do at the end of it with this concept that just like fashion, going to see a specialist, you may spend a little bit more, but you get a better product in the end. We also did a holiday gift guide for people in Memphis. This is a post that if you're in Memphis, you're going to want to click through. 0 to do with orthodontics, but again, it kind of endears people to our brand. It also gets people on our website, which helps our website rank higher. A couple more just quick examples, talking about our scanner when it's new technology is cool, and even questions like, what can I eat with braces? It's a very common question. It does really well as a blog. The takeaway, though, is that 42% of all of our total page views are on our blog. And so if you think blogging is stupid or it's a waste of time, I promise you it's not. When you look in 2015, pretty much the whole year, we had 17,000 views on a single post, and it was on white spots and braces. So a topic that, maybe you don't think it's that important, but if you were to Google white spots and braces, for a time at least, we were the first thing that would show up. So nationally, and people in Tokyo or China or Africa or whatever, if they're searching for these topics, they're not going to come see me for braces. I know that. But it is going to tell Google that my page has authority, and so then when someone in Memphis searches for braces, because someone in Hong Kong watched a video on my blog, it's going to attract more patients because I'm going to be ranked higher. My SEO is going to be stronger. So Google ads, we won't get into a lot of that, but Google ads, you got to still do them, even though organic is more important and more people pay attention to those search results. People still click on ads, and in some sense they're inexpensive, let's say. So Google ads obviously get more people on your website. Here's some statistics about them. Businesses who spend about $2, they get about spend $1, they get $2 back in return. Google is 82% of all paid search, so Bing and Yahoo really not doing a lot in the market. Google pretty much owns it. 70% of mobile searches call a business directly from Google, so having all that stuff filled out on your Google ads is very important, having your phone number in there, having your address. And then the top 3 paid ad spots get the majority of the clicks on the page, and so you really want to be bidding in a place where you're going to show up, or otherwise it won't do any good. Google also has a display network, and so like my mother is addicted to Candy Crush, and there's little ads that kind of pop up. That is typically through Google's display network, so they even, not only do they blanket the biggest search engine in the world, then they also blanket a lot of apps and other things to get your ad out there. All right, online chat. Very quickly, this is kind of my last digital marketing tip. This is something that's been very beneficial to us, and it's simply a chat applet at the bottom of our page. It's something that's been around for a long time, but it's something that you really can't do yourself. You really need to kind of outsource this to someone who can do it better than you can and who's there all the time, so almost 24 hours a day. We use Ortho Chats. There is also Ortho Engagement that does this. They're both marketed at Orthodontist, and it's just basically 24/7 chat. And you can see at the bottom of the page how there's a little box, and then it pops up, and it even pops up on mobile. And man, we get a lot of patients scheduling that way. And the truth is that people, especially younger, don't want to be on the phone. They want to, the most passive possible way of communicating, and yet they will still come into your office. And so it's something that you really want to seize the opportunity to capture as many leads as you can from your website, and online chat is a really good way to do that. So you can kind of see that this is back in September and October, but you're talking 21 leads, 17 leads, hundreds of support chats. Those are ones where someone's just, maybe on the blog and asking a question. But that's a lot of revenue, estimated revenue generated, $50,000, $60,000 of money that may go elsewhere if you didn't have the chat. Okay. All right. So real quickly, we're going to do 5 bonus tips. I'm just going to kind of lightning round through these. But here's some things in terms of a digital sense that we use that are tools that really benefit our practice. So the first is IFT, and that stands for if this, then that. So IFTTT. And yeah, you can do stuff like if you got a BMW, you can have it set to where it'll open your garage when you enter the driveway, which is pretty cool. But what we actually use it for is you see here this 4th one, you can tweet your Instagrams as native photos on Twitter. So it's a way that on sites that you may not use as often, like maybe Twitter or LinkedIn or Google+, you can have posts from Instagram automatically post in a way that looks native or that looks natural to that site automatically. And so we can't be in 7 places at one time, but you can use a system like IFT to automate that for you. Now, you shouldn't forget to do things manually when you need to. So if you're on Twitter and you never actually interact with anyone, and people send you messages and they never hear from you, they actually might get a negative perception about you. So don't completely sleep on those sites, but we also have to accept that the greater our reach, the more people who are going to pay attention to us. So if we can automate some of these tools, it's a real benefit. So again, IFT is a great site. Fiverr and Upwork, now this is not for everything, but again, going back to this idea of delegation, if there are things that we can delegate, maybe it's the creation of a flyer for an office event, or voiceovers for projects, or cartoons for the offices, or whatever, you can outsource that to Fiverr. You can also put a job up on Upwork, and you can get freelancers to do work for you, typically from other countries. And the idea is that creativity is not a purely American thing. There's people in Bangladesh or India who can do great work for much cheaper. So use that as you can. Another thing is G Suite. This used to be called Google Apps, and this is just email. So this is not like super fancy, but I hear a lot of people complain about email, and I've got to say that it's so easy. Google has a tool, G Suite, that combines email with all their other things like Google Docs and Google Drive and Sheets and some other amazing tools that they have, and it's just $5 per email per month. So for your entire staff, maybe it's $40, $45 or something like that. And it's really easy to manage. If someone leaves your office, it takes you like 2 minutes to get all that switched over, and you can even migrate that information to the person that's replacing them, so it makes it very nice and easy. There's also HIPAA compliancy through G Suite. It takes a little bit of effort, but it is there and available. Another one is Slack, and Slack is sort of an amalgam of text messaging and email and chat, and it was actually used by the Mars rover team. That's how it kind of got its initial popularity. But man, I use it for Neon Canvas and also use it for Saddle Creek. And what you'll see is you can have different channels. So from the top, we have admin and clinical, general, everyone's in general. And even you can have a random channel where you just kind of post funny stuff. But the admin channel will just be your admin team. The clinical will just be your clinical team. Marketing will just be the marketing team. And it makes it very easy to go back and find what it was that you talked about on a specific topic. With email and text is not really professional. This is a really nice way. If your team is 30 members, you can have everyone piped into this one thing. It's a great way to announce if you're going to be closed for snow or that sort of thing. We love Slack. Now, you may not use Slack. You may end up using Microsoft Teams, as Microsoft is apt to do. They've actually copied Slack, and they have their own version that will be a part of their suite of apps. And then Slack took out a full page in the New York Times kind of reprimanding them for that. But the concept is great, and I think it's one that you'll be using sooner rather than later, so I would go ahead and join Slack, get your team on there. It's very easy. The last thing is one that you might not expect, but it's called Blinkist. And what Blinkist is sort of like Cliff Notes for the digital age. And so I love to read, but sometimes you'll read like a 200-page self-help book, and at the end of it all, you're sort of like, I could have gotten out of that, probably 10 pages and gotten what I needed to get out of that book. Well, Blinkist does that for you. It takes a full book on all kinds of different topics, and it will summarize it down into about a 15-minute summary that you can listen to. It's about $80 a year. I don't get paid by Blinkist or any of these companies, but this is a really great way to learn new things and to read 4 or 5 books a month, whereas you might only get through one otherwise. So a really cool site. All right. So in conclusion, social media is extremely important. Digital marketing is extremely important, but I would say it's not the most important thing, any more than I would say that growing our practices is the most important thing. And so I think the most important thing in life is not a thing, as this quote says, but it's actually our loved ones in our lives. Now, I think of my staff or my team as they're my loved ones. They're part of my family. My patients are my family. And so I think we should try and focus as much as we can to attract people in our offices, but also not forget the responsibility we have as orthodontists and the opportunity that we have to really engage in people's lives and improve their lives. And so that's my challenge to you is to spend time like in that Eisenhower matrix that I showed. Spend time on the things that are not urgent but that are important, the things that will matter in 5, 10, and 15 years. So here's my information again. You can reach out to me. I do really want to thank you for tuning in today. There's a lot more, obviously, that we could talk about and that we will maybe in the future. I want to thank 3M for being so good to giving me this opportunity. And that's all I have. So thank you again for tuning in. Really appreciate you for spending your time, and I look forward to talking to you very soon. Thanks.